So I will now give a presentation on the call for tender itself. If we go to the next slide. So just to reiterate briefly the points that Keir and Carlo made, the system pillar, the rationale for it, as Keir said, a key opportunity is to use the process of change in the system, the rail system, to improve and harmonize processes and approaches to the delivery of change and the delivery of research. And the specific opportunity is that as systems change, so as, for example, DAC is introduced, or, for example, radio-based ERTMS is introduced, there's an opportunity for the sector, and the opportunity is to continue having national approaches, or to harmonize more broadly. And the key advantage from the perspective of deployment and deployment of innovation with greater harmonization is it moves from single national bespoke approaches to towards the single market, a larger market, cheaper products, and hopefully better approaches. So the point is not just to change on the opportunity of the introduction of a new technology, but also to introduce best practice approaches. This is a key part of the system pillar approach. There is information work from other sectors, telecoms, ICT, nuclear, that the rail sector can learn from in terms of managing change in safety critical network-based industries to improve the process in the future, that the speed of deployment of new technologies, the flexibility of systems to change over time. These things, there is best practice, it can be learned from. This is the opportunity within the system pillar. As Carlo said, this isn't just an academic exercise to draw an architecture. There will be, as a result of it, specifications, standards, guidance for procurement published from the system pillar and into the regulatory and standardization processes. So the goal is to effect change in future procurements. If we go to the next slide, please. This again reiterates the point that Carlo was making in terms of the overall JU. So, I mean, the work of the system pillar is to deliver the design principles, the operational concept, the system architecture, the associated specifications, which support harmonization at European level and which ultimately support a strengthened deployment of improvements to the rail system, and that it supports the overall goals of the joint undertaking in terms of affecting positive change through R&I at European level. If we go to the next slide. Don't need to read this slide. I put it here for 2 points. This is text from the Single Basic Act. The Single Basic Act is the legal act setting up Europe's rail joint undertaking and the other joint undertakings of the EU. This was adopted at the end of November last year. So this was essentially voted on and approved by all member states. And within that, there is a clear and foundational role of the system pillar within the JU to deliver what we're talking about, the overall system architecture, the specifications, the quality of the specifications, and the interfacing with other modes. And also in Article 86, there is a specific budget for the system pillar within the JU budget. So this is a contribution from the Commission, supported by member states, of 50 million euros to support the system pillar activities within the overall JU programme. If we go to the next slide, please. So now I'll go in some detail into the call overall. So as was said by Keir, the purpose of this call for tender is really to ensure the means by which the system pillar work will be delivered. So it is crucial that we receive high quality bids from the sector to support the work to be done. So the work to be done, as I say, is relevant to existing ongoing procurements. There are high expectations, high ambition in terms of the timelines for outputs from the system pillar. For example, for ambitious member state level procurements on the broader CCS system, or for example, for DAC. So there's quite high ambition in terms of timelines. There's a lot of work to be done, and the call is there to provide the bulk of the budget that's available for the system pillar to the sector in order to organize itself to provide the necessary input that we get the right outputs. If we go to the next slide, please. Just a remind on timing. This is a call for tender for framework contracts. So the deadline for submission of the deadline is for the framework contract, not for the subsequent call-off contracts. I'll come to that later. So the deadline for the framework contract is for the end of May, 3 p.m. sharp, as Carlo mentioned. And then we will look to proceed with the evaluation and award as quickly as possible, aiming for contract signature before the summer. Why is this? Well, at the moment we have a system pillar ramp-up process that is working. That work is contracted to essentially July, the summer, and the aim is to have the framework in place and the call-offs also in place or well advanced for as soon after the summer as possible, so that there is no gap in the work that is being carried out at the moment from the ramp-up period into the system pillar proper. If we go to the next slide, please. So very briefly, there are 3 lots. Each lot is a single framework contract. The first lot is for the system pillar core group. In the governance diagram that Carlo showed earlier, within the system pillar, essentially, in terms of the overall delivery structure, there are 2 main structures. There is the core group, and then there are the task-related resources. So the system pillar core group is a group from the sector, a balanced representation of the sector, which essentially leads in a proactive and highly expert way the overall work of the system pillar. And I'll go into the roles and responsibilities of the core group later on. Then lot 2 is the tasks themselves, the actual work. This is the bulk of the resource, because in the end it's where the bulk of people hours will be needed to deliver the overall work. And then the third lot is the CCS TSI maintenance activities. So this is an ongoing work which is to support the overall quality and development of the CCS TSI. Next slide, please. Yes, so this is an important note. It's made in the call text also. The overall tasks and structures and activities of the system pillar and also the JU itself are dynamic. They will be finalized and approved through the governance process as Carlo described. So there is a formalized process for determining the overall tasks and deliverables of the system pillar. This is in accordance with the Single Basic Act, the legal text, and then the rules of procedure as set out by the governing board and also the other bodies of the joint undertaking. So the structures and information as presented in the framework are there representing the current state of thinking, but this may and almost certainly will change as we engage and formally agree on the overall structure of the system pillar itself. And then certainly over time, as the work advances, hopefully activities will be completed, therefore they will finish, new activities will come online. So there is a dynamic structure to the work of the system pillar, which is important to consider, both in terms of the reading of the call text, but also in terms of the response to the call text, because the flexibility of approach is an important part in delivering the work of framework contracts. If we go to the next slide, please. So just a bit of detail. Obviously, there's quite a lot more in the call text, and also in the master plan of the JU, the multi-annual work program of the joint undertaking, about the overall objectives of the system pillar itself. But broadly, for both Lot 1 and Lot 2, so for the core group and the tasks themselves, the objective of the work is to deliver the results as set out in the single basic act. So a rail architecture, operational concept or concepts, and associated specifications, architectural migration considerations, to essentially support the delivery and the deliverables of the overall JU, but also the rail system evolution as a whole. And within the task structure, there are essentially two main concepts. The first is the consideration of the whole rail system. So this is task 1, and here the objective is to define for the whole rail system and also the interfaces to other modes at a high level, so in system level point of view down to level 2, the overall operational approach and kind of business process architecture for the overall system. So there needs to be analysis of where we are now, obviously quite diverse, the future consideration of improvements to be made, the associated architecture associated with that, and a consideration from an architecture perspective of the migration possibilities. That's task 1. Then there are detailed tasks following on from that. In the call for tender, it's described as CCS plus. So this is a focus on CCS. TMS, there's also, as was mentioned before, digital automated coupling. So we don't have within the JU resource, probably not in terms of overall resource within the sector, the ability to go into full detail for all elements of the whole railway system. Therefore, there needs to be a consideration and prioritization in areas. These will in the end be defined through the call-off contracts in terms of where the resource and focus will be and asked for in terms of the task to work. But it is already clear, and in particular, that there is a large focus on CCS in terms of the evolution of CCS. So there are a number of member states which are migrating network-wide level to radio-based ERTMS. So the opportunity there is, as this happens, to harmonize more broadly, not just for CCS TSI current scope, but more broadly, including interlockings and beyond. Associated that there is also should be a consideration of the European approach to traffic management systems. This is closely linked to the flagship area 1 within the joint undertaking. So for these areas within the tasks, there will be a large resource focused on getting a much greater level of detail, both in terms of the operational concept, operational processes, operational improvements, but also the detailed architecture processes down to in system architecture terminology level 5, which is the product specification level. So this is where the outputs in terms of specifications, standards, and public and procurement guidelines come out. The next slide, please. So just to go in a little more detail on the different elements of the lot. So for the system pillar core group, what we are looking for in terms of the response, the call for tenders, is a team, an expert team, representing the sector in a balanced way. This is important, as was mentioned earlier, the conception of the system pillar right from the beginning has been to ensure that there is a balanced approach, sector, suppliers, operators, infrastructure managers, to enable all the interests of the overall railway system to be appropriately represented. So there should be consideration about how a balanced representation is achieved. The first call off, again, will be determined after the framework is signed, but indicatively, we are expecting that we would be seeking a level of resource of 4 full-time equivalents, not necessarily 4 people, potentially up to 8 people, to populate the system pillar core group representatives from the sector side. On top of that, there will be representatives from the JU, myself, and from the agency as members of the core group. We would be seeking commitment from those people in terms of time, and also in terms of longevity. Now, I mean, I don't think we can request a 5 or 6 year full commitment, but I mean, what needs to be considered is the process by which continuity is assured in the event of core group change. But certainly, we're not looking for week-long commitments here. This is a relatively long-term commitment in terms of what is being sought in terms of response. There will be an expectation to ensure the independence of the core group approach, that there is no conflict of interest from their current and future place of employment, the necessary confidentiality arrangements also. This is necessary in order, as I say, to ensure the independence of the overall core group approach, so that we're not representing specific companies, we are representing overall the goals of the system pillar. If we go to the next slide, please. In terms of the tasks, I mean, again, there's quite a lot more detail in the call, but at a high level, the core group works under the supervision of the executive director and the JE structure to ensure the delivery of the tasks, and ensure the delivery of the tasks not just in a administrative way, but also in a content way. So the core group will be ensuring, through bringing in its expertise, that the direction of the tasks is going as per the agreed direction set out by the remit of the system pillar steering group and the governing board. So a key part is essentially coordination, management of delivery of the tasks and directed delivery of the tasks. Also, there is quite a large work. This is not just for the core group, but core group will play a key part in this, of the integration and work alongside the other elements within the joint undertaking. In the end, we're delivering an overall integrated program. There are clear links between the work done within the flagship area projects and the ongoing evolution of the system development. We are aiming for a coherent and integrated approach, so that both sides benefit and can influence each other. So there will be feedback from the system pillar outputs into the expected targets on the innovation pillar side. Similarly, if there are work and research and innovation which impact the improvements to be made, the overall architecture, that will be taken into account through the system pillar approach. So this is something that the core group needs to monitor and manage and facilitate. There is also, I mean, the specifications are an element of the output of the work of the system pillar, but what we are looking to put in place through the new joint undertaking is a clear and coherent and complete TSI and standardization input plan. So this is, from a JU perspective, should be the plan for all of the work of the JU, how it is likely to translate into future change at the regulatory or standardization level. In addition, there is an additional role for CCS linked activities where any enhancement that is categorized as such by the agency will be processed through the system pillar domain teams and architecture to give a view against the overall evolution of the system, and this will then feed back into the agency change control management processes. So there will be an evolution of those processes to take into account the role of the system pillar work. So that element is also an important consideration in terms of the outputs of the system pillar as a whole. And again, the system pillar core group will be managing the delivery of that. If we go to the next slide, please. So a lot of text here, but just briefly on the tasks. So here, broadly, the JU is seeking the right people to deliver the foreseen tasks within both task 1 and the additional tasks which go into more detail. So we're talking about people and expert people in the first instance. There will, of course, be through the call-off contracts not just a request for FTEs and FTEs of the requisite expertise, but also an expected goal of delivery in terms of level of output. Now, in the tender specifications, there is an Annex 9 and Annex 10, which sets out, again, a snapshot. This is not fixed, but it sets out a snapshot of the current consideration of the description in reasonable detail of the tasks to be delivered. And in Annex 10, the overall, it's set out as an indicative first call-off contract. So the level of resource required, the type of expertise required. Again, indicative, but should give an idea both in terms of the numbers, but also in terms of the level of expertise that is being sought from the first call-off contract being set out. There is a need again here for balance in a number of directions. So balance in terms of the supply and the customers, balance in terms of geography, balance in terms of overall stakeholder composition, and to the extent possible, gender balance. So we are seeking an overall balanced approach to the people put forward for the Lot 2 system pillar tasks. If we go to the next slide, please. So if we go to Lot 3, so this is, as I explained at the beginning, it's a continuation of current work that is at the moment supported by a framework contract within Shift to Rail, a certain element of that anyway, which is on the maintenance of the CCS TSI. So there is an active role of the sector in this already, supporting the so-called EECT process within the agency. This work will continue. Obviously, we hope that the number of error corrections reduces. However, we're introducing new functionalities in the new TSI, the ATO. There will be the new future radio system. We are looking in the overall ambition of the system pillar to broaden the scope of the CCS TSI. So this will be an important element ongoing, that we are maintaining the quality of the overall TSI specifications. Go to the next slide, please. So now some information on the framework itself in terms of duration and value. So formally, this will run for 12 months, but it will be automatically renewed unless there is a formal notification to the contrary 5 times. So you should work on the basis that this is a framework contract for 6 months, 6 years rather, and as Carlo said, that corresponds to the overall financial framework. So we are looking here to set in place an overall stable framework to support the vast bulk of the work of the system pillar with this overall framework contract. If we go to the next slide. In terms of value, So the total value of the framework is up to 45 million euros. That is split here between lot 1, 4 million, lot 2, 37 million, lot 3, 4 million. These are all up to figures. This is a framework contract. So in the end, this is the beginning and the framework within which we would then seek specific activities. It should also be noted, it is clear we are looking to contract through this framework contract the vast bulk of the work of the system pillar, but there will be activities of the system pillar that may sit outside of this framework. So, for example, in the first instance, we would not expect the project management office work associated with the horizontal activities of the core group to come from here. So that would not be part of a call-off. That's the expectation at the moment. So again, we're looking at a kind of flexible and dynamic process, but it's clear in terms of the volume and the duration of the overall contract that this is where we're seeking the vast bulk of input for system pillar tasks. Just a point to note, as Carlo mentioned, there is the possibility, if somehow there were future budget available, or for other considerations, that there is a possibility to renegotiate the levels within the contract based on the paragraph at the bottom. So within 3 years of the agreement, it is possible, following a negotiated procedure, to potentially uplift the overall amounts. That remains to be seen and is highly dependent on a number of factors which are currently outside of the control of the system pillar and the JU. But the flexibility is there if the opportunity presents itself and the need presents itself. If we go to the next slide, please. This is now on the rates. So we have put in place here a slightly different structure per lot. For lot 1, so for the system pillar core group, we are proposing that it would be populated all by what we deem senior experts. That's defined within the call for tender at a level of 900 euros per day. For lot 2, there would be 2 different levels of expert, junior and senior, and the overall maximum rate is the same, but it is expected that there would be a discount of 20% overall in order to have some kind of leverage effect from the overall budget put forward by the JU. Otherwise, we are restricted to the overall 50 million in total. And for lot 3, this follows the current approach in the current framework contract, where essentially the rates are again split between junior and senior experts, but for each euro that the JU is putting forward, the contractor is also expected to make a euro available. So there is a different structure per lot. Essentially, we consider the core group fully funded, the task resource mostly funded in terms of approach, but we are looking for some leverage effect in terms of the contribution from the sector, and the lot 3 continues the arrangement that is already in place with the current ERTMS framework contract. If we go to the next slide, please. So this is the final slide in this part. Just to emphasize again, what we are proposing and seeking as responses now is a response to the framework call for tenders. Once this is in place, this will be followed by specific contracts. The specific contracts will set out precisely what is required when, both in terms of resource and in terms of expected output from those contracts. So for lot 2 and lot 1, there is within Annex 9 and 10 an indicative view on what the first call-off would be, but there can obviously be second, third, fourth, fifth call-offs, not restricted in time. The second can follow the first within 3 months, but obviously restricted in terms of the overall budget that is set for the system pillar within the JU. So that we have the budget constraint, and then we have the need and prioritization of deliverables. So the Annex 10 in particular, also Annex 9, gives an idea of the current indication. This may change also over the next few months. There's a system pillar steering group meeting in May and June, and there's a governing board in June considering more broadly governance structures. So there may be a slight evolution there, but the framework requirement is the same, which is a core group, a mechanism to get expert resource from the sector supporting the definition of the high-level operational concept system architecture of the whole system, and also a detailed focus on certain elements, certainly CCS, certainly TMS, certainly DAC, in the first instance. So with that, I think that's the final slide for this part of the discussion. There are 3 minutes left before coffee break. And
Ian, there is a question on the chat, a technical question in the chat. Maybe you could answer the question.
Yes, so whole railway system. So this is defined in the Single Basic Act, and it's basically the rail system as defined in the Interoperability Directive, which is essentially the heavy rail system. This is the scope of applicability of the system pillar. But in addition, there are the interfaces to the other transport modes, which is an important part of task 1. I don't know, Keir or Carlo, if you want to supplement anything else on that.
Sorry, Ian, can you repeat the question?
It was a question, do you confirm the whole railway system is to be read as it's moving single European rail area related, plus the interfaces to the other rail modes? I mean, it is yes, the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as we said at the outset, I mean, the whole point of the system pillar is to try and ensure that we actually do look at holistically at the railway system and ensure that we build the structures that then allow us to plug in the innovations that we're developing elsewhere in the JU, and also allow the railway to develop and flourish. So, I mean, clearly we have to cover everything. And to be very clear, I mean, that certainly includes the urban railway to the extent it's part of heavy rail. I mean, there's an ongoing discussion as to the extent to which we should cover the sort of urban rail where it's not connected. I mean, I think we're not going to completely cover that, but at the same time, where we can apply the same principles and hopefully also bring down the costs of urban rail as well. I mean, we certainly shouldn't shy away from doing that, but I mean, I think that is a slightly grey area. But for the whole of the system as covered by the TSIs, etc., I mean, clearly that is all the scope of the system pillar.
Thank you. Maybe only to complement, also because in the innovation pillar, we have some activity dedicated to rail, light rail, trams, and automation in relation to this. So the full logic is that we need to be sure that on the one hand, the rail system, let's say the main rail system is fully integrated with other mode of transport. Urban mobility is one of the key elements for the successful integration of transport for the passenger. It's without this, we will be still being isolated, and this is exactly what we need to avoid. But also the idea to do innovation on the light rail, on automation in the urban rail as the objective also not only to develop such technology for a town, for a urban environment one, but to be able to scale it up in different type of environments. So if we develop ATO for trams, like train, can we have this model be transferred after in different type of environments with the same similar logic? So the idea is really to start to move in this direction, keeping clearly knowing that physical environment will be completely different, most probably, but in some aspects we can benefit from the common work that we have done in the joint undertaking. Thank you.
Thanks, Keir, Carlo. I see there are a couple more questions, but I would propose that we stop for coffee as per the agenda, because there should be plenty of time after the next presentation to take hopefully all questions that are proposed. So I will stop the meeting for 15 minutes. We come back at 11:15 for the presentation on the formal evaluation approach, and then we will cover all the questions. Thank you.
Great. Bye.